think about this situation. You're a first-year teacher and your principal is about to evaluate you for the very first time. What do you think about? The lesson plan. Or you are in your final semester before student teaching. You are ready to move on to student teaching, but you have to prepare for those finals. And what are you being asked to do? Write lesson plans. That's right. As a teacher, lesson planning is a major part of what you are doing every day. So, as we've talked about before, and as we will keep talking about, lesson planning is a challenge for many teachers. Today, we are going to talk about a quick how-to on lesson planning alignment. If you haven't had a chance, go back and watch my previous lesson plan alignment video to get a better outline of how do I make sure that my lessons are fully aligned. But today we're going to have a little fun with lesson plan alignment. And I'm going to outline 4 different grade levels and the overview of what a lesson should have in order for it to be aligned. Are you ready? All right, let's start with kindergarten. Kindergarten is my favorite. I love it so much. But how do I make sure that my lesson plan is aligned? We're going to focus on 3 areas in a lesson plan that you need to make sure all line up together to have full lesson plan alignment. First, your state standard. Next, your objective. And finally, what is that assessment that you are using to measure? If those 3 are aligned, everything else will fall into place. Look at this kindergarten standard. It says, represent addition and subtraction concretely. If you are really dissecting standards, the first thing you would do was recognize what are you asking the students to know and do. And the thing you're asking them to do is represent addition and subtraction. And when you hear that word concretely, that means with some sort of concrete object. So an objective that would align would say students will be able to model addition and subtraction problems using concrete objects, then explain their thinking. And this shows alignment because when you have the word represent in your standard, that means that they have to represent addition and subtraction, not just explain it, but be able to show you that. So using that word model in the objective is a clear alignment. Finally, what is our assessment? Our assessment is that given Unifix cubes or some sort of concrete manipulative, students will be able to listen to a story problem and represent that story problem with manipulatives and solve. Then I would ask them to turn to their shoulder partner and explain their problem solving. You're going to want to repeat this multiple times because as the teacher, for alignment purposes, you need to make sure that the students are able to model. You need to make sure that they're able to explain. And you want to do that multiple times so that you have enough time to observe each student. So alignment comes because we are representing addition and subtraction using concrete manipulatives, Unifix cubes, and we are asking students to show us that they can add and subtract with that. Once you have those 3 things in place, you can complete the remainder of your lesson plan, your vocabulary, the resources you need, and the body. Make sure that the body of your lesson walks them through the steps they need in order to be ready for that assessment. Great. We see alignment in this lesson. Let's move on to first grade. In first grade, our standard says, tell and write time in hours and half hours using analog and digital clocks. First thing I'm going to do is dissect that standard. And I'm going to document or highlight tell and write. This is what we are asking the students to do. So in my objective, I have stated students will be able to read and record time to the nearest hour and half hour on both analog and digital clocks. Does this align? Yes, because we are asking them to not only read, which is the telling part of your standard, but also record, which is the writing part of your standard, to the nearest hour and half hour. Make sure they're doing both on both the analog and digital clock. I have hit every single part of that standard. So what is my assessment, and does it align? Let's see. Read around the room. I will place digital and analog clock images around the room. And then the students will get a piece of paper with numbers 1 through 5 on it. They are going to locate a clock around the room and write the time shown on the clock on their piece of paper. They will need to make sure that they locate both analog and digital clocks and then submit their paper, and that is what I will check to measure that success. Does this align? Let's check it out. That standard said tell and write time. Have my students done that? Yes, they have, because on their piece of paper during their assessment, they have to be able to read around the room and tell time, and then they have to write it down on their piece of paper. Does it align with my objective? Yes, it does. They are reading and recording time to the half hour and hour. Perfect. Another aligned lesson plan. From there, again, you will fill in your resources, your vocabulary, the body. How are you going to teach them how to read both of these types of clocks? That is still so important. All right, let's move on to second grade. Let's see, does this align? Does it not align? Here is my standard. Ask and answer such questions as who, what, where, when, why, and how to demonstrate understanding of key details in a text. Wow, that has a lot going on in that standard. So the first thing I want to do is dissect and break down what is it we're asking the students to do. We're asking them to ask and answer questions. So I'm going to highlight that. Demonstrate understanding. I'm going to highlight that. And then key details is really important. That's what they need to know in this particular standard. Let's listen to the objective that I have outlined. Students will be able to identify the main idea of an informational text. Does this align? Again, let's go back to our standard. Ask and answer such questions as who, what, where, when, why, and how. My objective is asking them to identify the main idea of an informational text. This objective is not aligned with the standard because it's focused on the main idea, which is about summarizing the overall text. It is not the same as asking and answering questions. So we do not have alignment. Let's just look at the assessment to see, is it aligned? Is it not? Using a graphic organizer, students will listen to a text read aloud by a teacher, then identify the who, what, where, when, why, and how questions about the text. Oh, I've heard this before. So my assessment is answering the questions that are important in my standard. However, the objective is not outlining that. So this particular lesson is not aligned. You need to go back to the objective and rewrite that to capture the who, what, where, when, why, and how of the text. If you do that, then this would be aligned. We have gone through 3 different outlines of lesson plans, really looking at the standard, objective, and assessment, and are they aligned? We're going to do one more to see if it is aligned or not aligned. We're going to move into 3rd grade. So we've covered everywhere from kindergarten to 3rd grade. All right, let's look at the standard first. The standard says, conduct short research projects that build knowledge about a topic. So first thing I do is dissect those standards, and I'm going to highlight conduct because that is an important verb that the students need to demonstrate, and they're trying to build knowledge. That's what they need to know. They need to build knowledge about a topic. So my objective says students will be able to write a personal narrative with descriptive details. Does this align or not align? Nope, this lesson does not align because the objective focuses on creative writing and narrative skills, not research or fact fact gathering. Let's look at what the assessment is for this lesson. Students will create a short research project on a topic of their choice. Okay, I hear the alignment starting. Gathering facts from multiple sources and presenting them in a report. With this, make sure that we have some sort of objective that has them examining, exploring, researching a topic and gathering information. That is the core of what we're trying to get them to do in that objective. They need to be able to go out to whatever resource they are looking at and pull information from that on a topic. That is what you should be measuring, and that is what your objective should be focused on. If you do that, you will have alignment in your lesson, and you can start building out the body and what it is you're going to do to teach them that from there. Great. So we've seen 2 lesson plan outlines that were aligned, 2 that were not aligned. Remember, start with the core of your standard, your objective, and your assessment, and look to see that those line up and work together. And from there, you start building out your lesson. I hope that you've enjoyed looking at, does it align or does it not align?